It's a new world, at least when it comes to technology and those who use it. Businesses and organizations of all sizes are feeling the pressure to not only keep up with changing technology, but also with the demands of the millennial generation workforce, who expect instant response, access to data anywhere, anytime, and the latest and greatest devices to help them do their jobs. Hello, I'm Joyce Chutchian, Senior Managing Editor at IDG Enterprise Custom Solutions Group. According to a 2012 Gartner survey, 90% of enterprises have already deployed mobile devices, just one of many growing technologies. It's becoming increasingly popular for users to bring their personal smartphones and tablets to work and expect to be able to connect to the corporate network. And as businesses adapt to the ever-increasing consumerization and bring-your-own-device trends, IT often finds itself in the position of reactive mode, accommodating users' needs and expectations. IT also has to enable secure access to the corporate network. And don't forget the cloud, which brings a whole new set of opportunities, cost savings, and most importantly, productivity. With me here today to discuss this business transformation and how enterprises can meet today's unified communications demands through the concept of unified communications as a service is Jay Krauser, Director of Univerge Cloud Services at NEC. Welcome, Jay.
Thank you, Joyce. I appreciate meeting with you today.
Jay works with other NEC divisions, subsidiaries, and NEC partners to help build successful cloud-based solutions for NEC's direct sales force and dealers. He has a diverse background in business, engineering, and telecommunications management, and he brings a unique perspective to our discussion. Jay's past experiences include holding various management positions as an end user and purchaser of telecommunications, being a telecom dealer, as well as bringing award-winning products and applications to the market through his long tenure working at NEC. Before we get started, just a couple of quick notes here on the webcast. You can take advantage of the Enlarge Slides button on your screen as needed, and you'll also see some resources in the webcast player that you can reference later for more information on unified communications as a service. So let's begin, Jay. First of all, can you provide us with a brief background on what trends you're seeing in today's workforce and what changes are you seeing in the way they communicate?
Well, thank you, Joyce. I think that's a great place to start. There's many trends that we're starting to see in the industry, but I think the three top from a business transformation perspective kind of flows in a step-by-step approach. One, the strain on organizations to do more with less, the geographical workforce, how technology itself can help in those aspects. And then, of course, as you brought up, the millennium workforce and how that workforce requires or almost demands a different way of doing business. So that where you work and how you communicate and when you do all that is evolving, and some of that is based on the generational changes of the millennium workforce. Matter of fact, when you look at some of the information that's out there, when you look at the next year or two, more than 50% of the workforce is going to fit into that millennium category. Those are people that are born after 1980. They expect the internet, and they expect to be able to collaborate anywhere, anytime, with devices that are no longer just a desk phone.
So in terms of the CIO, how are these trends affecting them, and what are their biggest challenges?
Well, again, I think there's many challenges out there from the business perspective, but when you take a look at what we have just defined as some of the major trends, you have that millennium workforce. You have the BYOD concept, bring your own device. They do not want to come to work and have a more antiquated device than they do in their personal life. But when they bring that smart device to work, there's another set of issues, one being just pure connectivity to a legacy infrastructure that may be within the organization. But most importantly, there's a security threat. When that device is out in the world and it gets lost, there could be lots of documentation that are proprietary to the organization and could become a threat to that organization long term from a competitive perspective. So being able to make sure that those devices are managed properly, not only from where they can be, what websites they can access, but that the information that's on those devices are very secure and can be erased at time of that device being lost. Because of these devices and the streaming audio and video and collaboration, the exponential growth of bandwidth that's needed within the organization continues to evolve. The demand from a CIO level to evolve with this fast-paced technology, no longer can technology be viewed as a 7 or 10-year investment that companies used to do many years ago. And it went from 7 to 10 to 5 to 7 to 3 to 5, and now it's 1 to 2 years as fast as that technology is evolving. They need to be able to deploy this technology in half the time with half the budget. And some of those issues now between bandwidth and security and budgets are making organizations, especially the CFO, start to look at moving from more of a capital expenditure that has peaks and valleys to more of a managed environment, which gives you an operational expenditure so that they can manage that and they don't have those huge peaks of capital asset purchases. And with that move from CapEx to OpEx, organizations are starting to now look at third parties, and that also includes the cloud. So as you can see in this illustration, currently there's almost 22% of that being outsourced. And over the next few years, you're going to see it grow, and I personally believe this might be a little bit of a conservative number, from 22 to 34. I could see it even moving up to as close to 45 or 50%. Given the next few years. Not only are people looking at the cloud from an outsourced perspective, but then there's discussions about where it fits in the marketplace. Is it an SMB play? Is it an enterprise play? And you'll see here in this statistic that more than 70% of large enterprises will start to deploy pilots in this calendar year, 2012. And what we're seeing in the market is just that, with a very rapid pace of growth moving into the cloud based on some of the challenges that we talked about earlier in this slide.
Thanks, Jay. I've also seen a lot of research on cloud and cloud services, and we're definitely seeing an increase in general. So in terms of cloud services, can you tell us what you mean by that and how cloud services will benefit businesses?
Thank you, Joyce. Another good question. When I talk to people in the industry and in the field, I like to kid around and say that if I ask 50 people what cloud means to them, I might get 250 different answers. And I really like this slide because it really starts to talk about the three major categories when you're talking about cloud. And once you understand those three, it's easy to see what services are your organization are looking for. So if you look at the three, it's your characteristics, your delivery model, and your deployment model. So first of all, let's take a look at characteristics. It should be on demand. Easy to purchase, easy to expand, easy to subtract. Cloud should be elastic. It should be on a ubiquitous network. So when that millennium workforce is starting to bring their smartphones, their laptops, their tablets, where they want to connect and how they want to connect, it should be ubiquitous across the network. Location independence, again, that geographical disbursement. It should be elastic, like we talked about earlier, and it's more of a pay-as-you-go, or that OpEx model we talked about. Then when you look at delivery models, there's three major areas. There is a SaaS offering, software as a service. There's a platform as a service, more of a development environment. And then there's infrastructure as a service. And then when you move on to the deployment, there's private, which traditionally has been still a CapEx purchase. And when you move more towards the OpEx, it starts to look as a hybrid or a public cloud offering. And primarily what we're going to be talking about today is software as a service, the SaaS area. That's where Ucast fits in. And we're going to be talking about public deployments that could also obviously evolve to a hybrid where you have some on-prem equipment and some cloud-based offerings. And some of the things that when you start to move from that software as a service and that public environment, there's some factors that organizations are looking for. First of all, from the business perspective or the CIO perspective, they're looking for the flexibility, the elasticity we talked about, the OpEx, the CapEx. but not giving up on the redundancy and reliability that traditionally on-prem deployments provide. And the reason that they're being driven in that area, which we've talked about earlier, is the benefits to the end user. That ability to the latest technology, that every month, every 6 months, every year, you're getting faster and faster information and data. Those devices that continue to come out quickly, they're able to be securely attached to the network, which allows them that anywhere, anytime access to the data they need to make the decisions they need in the area that they work, which of course increases their productivity and the performance and their ability to do their job.
Thanks, Jay. You mentioned Ucast, or Unified Communications as a Service. Can you tell us exactly what that is, and what does an IT decision maker need to consider when choosing a Ucast solution provider?
Yes. First of all, from a Ucast perspective, there are some major components of feature functionality that should be able to be accessed by those employees that we were just talking about. First of all, traditional voice and telephony features that have been around for many, many years. The ability to do conferencing. Not the traditional 2- and 3-, 4-way conferencing, but multi-point-to-point conferencing that may or may not include video. Of course, messaging, your unified messaging platform where you can have access to your stored messages from any device, whether you're sitting at your desktop, your smartphone, etc., and not have to check a cell phone, smartphone, voicemail, and then your corporate voicemail, being able to have one mailbox that's tightly integrated. And then you take a look at presence and instant messaging, different ways people want to start communicating. And presence no longer is just I'm on net, off net, which when it was first introduced years ago. Now people want to integrate applications so that when you look at the presence, it says that I'm out of the office, and it's linked to applications like TripIt, where you know I'm on an airplane, you know I don't land until 10:45, so then there's no chance that I'm going to be able to respond to you. Also, you should have clients that are ubiquitous, meaning they act and look and react the exact same way depending on the operating system, the device that it's on. So whether you're on a desktop, a laptop, a tablet, a smartphone, one running OS, one running Android, all of those devices should interact and look the same. And the presence and the information flow should be ubiquitous across those. And then when you take a look at, should you be giving up anything when you go from a Ucast as a service versus an on-prem unified communications platform? And I think it's just the opposite. You should be receiving all of the same benefits of a premise base, including some benefits, but the delivery model and the CapEx, OpEx start to change.
Thanks, Jay. That gives a good summary on what IT decision makers should look for in a Ucast solution. So can you talk also about the types of users that can utilize and benefit from it?
Absolutely, Joyce. Thank you. I think when you take a look at the workplace today, you're starting to have different types of workers. You have your traditional in-the-office brick-and-mortar worker. You have your at-home workers, whether those are temporarily or they permanently work out of their home. Or you have the road warrior, the mobile worker. All of those types of workers now are fitting into either the horizontal workplace or very industry-specific verticals like healthcare, hospitality, higher ed, federal government. So having the flexibility and having models that allow you to customize that flexibility to meet the needs of these different types of workers are extremely critical. So in this example, what you're trying to make sure that you can purchase is something that's very easy to buy, deploy, and manage. So you have some workers that need basic telephony capabilities. Then you move up into a standard or a premium package that gives you different types of flexibility and functionality based on those different types of workers that we talked about on the previous slide. But you also want to be able to customize, because a standard user might only need one or two features and will not need the entire package that's offered in a premium. So to save your organization time and effort, you can just drag and drop a couple of features onto a particular user and give them more flexibility. So simple standards that are customizable based on the different types of users that will be in your organization. So as you move from those standardized, customizable bundles, you start to look at a more real-life example. And those different types of workers, whether they're at home or on their smartphone as a road warrior, they need to be able to have that same data, whether they're looking at a presence on a phone, IMing an individual, that individual wants to click and start sharing screens at an ad hoc type deployment, they should be able to do that. They should also have the flexibility to take that and make it a scheduled event. So they should be able to use regular business tools like Outlook and be able to launch into collaboration sessions by being connected to the internet.
Thanks, Jay. So now I have two questions. First, with Ucast, and this is coming from an IT decision maker's point of view, are my desktop phones going away? And also, what about the bring your own device trend? How does that work with Ucast?
All really good questions. There's a lot of debate on the traditional desk phone and where its lifeline is. If you're talking about a phone that has keys to dial phone numbers, I believe that those phones are in their last generation of deployment. But when you start to take a look at some of the desk phones that are much more intelligent than phones of, let's say, 10 years ago, and incorporating video, XML applications, all of those types of capabilities, I do believe there's a space for the more intelligent desk phone over the next few years. You also have specialized conferencing phones, and I believe that those will be around in conference rooms for many, many years, and they will evolve and get smarter with more intelligence and capabilities of video as well. But there's no debate about the utilization of BYOD. We have talked about it a few times in this presentation, and whether it's the company that's mandating and deploying the devices or the employee trying to mandate and bring their devices, the connectivity to those devices are key. And traditionally, when you're dealing with a legacy deployment, it might not meet all of the latest standards that are out there that organizations would need to connect these types of devices. When you're dealing with that from a Ucast perspective, because it's cloud-based, it's always staying up with the latest and greatest standards, and the connectivity points are much easier. So whether you're talking about transport, which would be a SIP connection, whether you're talking about security and managing those, there are many different aspects, but a cloud can provide you the service to manage those devices as well as allowing those devices to be connected safely and securely to your network.
Thanks, Jay. So clearly BYOD and the cloud are still evolving, and there's a lot of information to be known. And with that, I have a few more questions. In terms of IT decision makers, what else should they be looking for when they're choosing a Ucast provider? And also, do they need to look at the back end of how it's being delivered? For example, security, which seems to be a major hesitance among IT decision makers moving to the cloud. Can you touch on that a bit?
Joyce, that's a really good question, because one of the things that actually separates the different providers that are out there is how it's delivered. And just because it's moving from on-prem to the cloud doesn't mean the need for that redundancy and resiliency, the 5 nines that organizations demand from their communications platforms over the last 10, 20, 30 years has to go away. So they need to make sure that there's geographically dispersed redundant data centers, right? So asking, how am I going to receive this service from you? Not just looking at feature functionality. Is it a diverse data centers? Do they have the highest levels of certification? Whether you're talking about a SAS 70, Type 2, Type 3 type location? Is there compliance? Depending on the type of vertical or horizontal business, a HIPAA or a PCI compliance for those data center. You want to make sure that they're not just tied to a single carrier or a single methodology from that carrier, meaning like a PRI versus a SIP trunk. So that brings us into multi-levels of redundancy. Because you're geographically dispersed, they should start to look at, is the hardware within each data center that the cloud is running on, is it resilient? Is it redundant? Is the application geo-redundant? So that if there's a catastrophic failure from Mother Nature on an East Coast or a West Coast, depending on where the data centers are located, will your company feel an outage? Will you not have connectivity because of a hurricane or a tornado or an earthquake? All of those things have to come into play. And then you want to take a look at the ongoing maintenance and capability, which again, when you're trying to reduce costs, sometimes that's the first thing that is cut out. So you want to make sure that there is a NOC center that is maybe even in a tertiary location that will give you 24/7, 365 live body answer, so that you're not just going to a receptionist that's going to take your problem down. So hopefully the cloud should be able to tell you you're having a problem before you even have to make that phone call, because it's being monitored 24/7. And then you talk about security. There's many different ways that you access the cloud. You'll hear terms like a managed network, MPLS circuit, right? And there's a whole set of your firewalls, the data center firewalls that have to be put into play. You also hear people talk about BYOB, bring your own bandwidth, or OTT, over-the-top bandwidth, which means you're just bringing in a large pipe and you're using the public internet. So how do you securely connect using session border controllers, SIP ALGs, et cetera, to make sure that that transmission is protected and seamless from your perspective? And at the end of the day, what you're looking for is that business continuity. So data centers, disaster recovery locations, NOC monitoring, 24-hour, all of those things play into that resilient and redundancy that you need from an infrastructure perspective and how those services are delivered to you. But when you take a look at one last important piece, is there is a lot of hidden costs when you start to do business in the cloud. And you need to make sure that you look at your total cost of ownership, not just a per seat, per user price. So you want a simplistic bill. It should just have your CPU rental. When I say CPU rental, maybe it's infrastructure, your layer 2, layer 3 switching that are on-prem. It could be video phones, desk phones, all of those types of things. It should include a certain amount of LD or international or any future services that your organization may need. It should be easily spelled out. You should understand that from a total cost of ownership. You should receive a single bill and then make that single monthly payment. So technology needs to be simple. Billing and payment needs to be simple. The usability needs to be simple as you move forward.
Well, Jay, you've given us a significant amount of valuable information here, and clearly there's quite a lot to consider with unified communications as a service and the cloud. So do you have any final advice or information that would be helpful to CIOs?
Yes, I think we've tried to do a good job of showing you where some trends are and where the industry's moving and the millennium workforce and all of those things. So in summary, what I would ask you to look at is look how fast the technology is changing and where and when and how people work, the geographical displacement and the strain that puts on your infrastructure. The tools you need are there. From a cloud perspective, architecture is very important. That's what's going to separate the partners that you would choose to deliver that service to you, the architecture, the redundancy, the resiliency, making sure they truly have different roles and models for the different types of workers. One size does not fit everybody in your organization. But again, it should still be simplified packaging with a very easy-to-understand bill that delivers a total cost of ownership that makes sense for your organization. And most importantly, It's got to be able to evolve and deploy very easy. If your organization embraces BYOD and collaboration from anywhere, you need to make sure that those things are secure. Your IT staff is constantly being pressured because of all the things that we've talked about. So look at the cloud as a true extension of your capabilities of your own IT staff. And I think making sure that the ROI is there for your organization as you move from a traditional peak and valley capital expenditure to that operational model that allows you to plan out your technology needs based on projects, workforce, and the geographical location of that workforce.
Okay, thanks, Jay. I think you made a key point there in terms of looking at the cloud as an extension of your staff capabilities. There's a lot of information here, and there's a lot to consider. Right now, that's all the time we have. So I'd like to thank you again, Jay, for joining me today.
You're very welcome. It was a pleasure.
And be sure to take a look at the resources section of the Webcast player, where you can find downloadable resources on unified communications as a service. On behalf of NEC and CIO, I'm Joyce Chutchian. Thanks for joining us.